It's now my pleasure to bring to you Mr. Jonathan Hendrix and his paper, The Purpose for Friendship. Now, I'll have to say there's also a particularly nice thing here. This is the first time in 6 years that we have a Hinrichs back at the podium. So, we have the
Okay. Friendship was a common topic that many writers have written about through literature. Writers have tried to formulate exactly what friendship is through philosophy, or have written novels of people that had friendship which the author has believed was ideal. Writers have tried to explain the purposes and traits that friendship has. Each writer seems as if he has their own idea and of what purpose and attributes friendship possesses. Blaise Pascal, an inventor, believed people seek friendship because they enjoy the friend for the traits and items that he possesses. Pascal's friendship relied heavily on the fact that the friends were willing to sacrifice their goods and time to their friend. Martin Luther believed that friends should seek a friendship that has harsh words and criticism as a major component of the friendship. Luther believed that true friends would be willing to sacrifice the friendship for the moral good of their friend. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a philosopher, thought that people displayed friendship because it increased the chance of preservation for themselves and the human race. Rousseau's friendship relied on the fact that people must have a mutual willingness to sacrifice for his friend. Kant, a philosopher, believed people displayed friendship because being kind toward other people was the right thing to do. Each of the authors seems to display a different perception of friendship. Because friendship was an abstract action, it is only recognizable to people by the traits that are visible to them. By examining these authors, it would be clear that these authors write about certain facets of friendship that Jesus demonstrated when he came to save mankind. Blaise Pascal wrote a book of Proverbs, the Français, in which he formulated why people desire friends. He believed that a person was valued by their friends for the traits and materials they possessed. Pascal said, "If one loved me for my judgment, memory, he does not love me, for I can lose these qualities without losing myself. Where then is this ego? If it be neither in the body nor in the soul. And how love the body or the soul except for these qualities which do not constitute me, since they are perishable?" Pascal formulated that if a person were to love the friend for his traits, the friendship would be about the traits, not about the friend. Pascal says the friendship was based on what he called ego. Ego is how a person was seen by other people, which is through their materials and attributes. A person could have the appearance or impression of being a different person because they have lost part of their ego, yet still be the same person. Pascal then argued that it is natural that people have friendship toward ego, because they are only aware of the physical and mental attributes of a person. He said, "For it is impossible and would be unjust to love the soul of a person in the abstract and whatever qualities might be therein. We never then love the person, but the only qualities." Pascal forms the idea that because people were not capable of loving the abstract side of a person, because it was not possible for a physical being to be aware of the metaphysical. Pascal then says that people only have friendship based on ego, because that is what people have the ability to be aware of. An example of friendship that ego was the cause of friendship in literature was the friendship written of by Miguel de Cervantes between Don Quixote and Sancho. In this relationship, Don Quixote and Sancho both enjoy the friendship because of ego. Don Quixote promised an island to Sancho, and in return, Sancho offers Don Quixote what appeared to be unfaltering loyalty. This friendship continued to grow as the story progresses because of the sacrifices the two friends made for each other. This friendship between the two friends seems as if it began with ego, but continued into a deeper friendship between the two friends, as they were willing to sacrifice their belongings and ideas with each other. Pascal's friendship appeared to be the beginning of this friendship, because it began with the friends admiring each other's ego. Then once they sacrificed for each other, it became a more meaningful friendship. Martin Luther, a German monk, believed that admonishment was a true trait of friendship. He believed that man was a creature who was devoid of any goodness, so was constantly in need of admonishment. Luther thought criticism and bitter words are necessary in every kind of life, as with any virtue. Yet this anger must not come from envy or malice, but only from fatherly affection and Christian zeal. He thinks criticism and bitter words were important for friendship because it pushed friends to become better. Because Luther believed in absolute human depravity, he believed that friends would always have the chance to admonish one another. Luther did not wish this to be a hindrance between friends. He believed that if two friends fairly and honestly used criticism and bitter words, their friendship would improve, because the friendship will not depend on materials or attributes. Martin Luther placed guidelines on using this friendship, or using rebuke and criticism toward a friend. He believed that one must not rebuke one's friend while one was either envious or angry, because those feelings could cloud one's judgment. Martin Luther says that when a person rebuked a friend, it should be done with fatherly affection and Christian zeal. Fatherly affection defined when a person should be rebuked. A friend should be rebuked as they see their friend in the act of doing evil. Martin Luther says that rebuke should be done with Christian zeal, so the rebuker did not only expose what was wrong, but also offered a solution to the problem. Martin Luther described a friendship that was strengthened in the fires of criticism. Luther's friendship could cause a friend to lose their friend because he could have his feelings hurt. Luther believed that friends who were willing to sacrifice the friendship for the morality of his friend is definitive of a true friendship. Luther had the same idea of friendship as the author of Proverbs, who said, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person another." This proverb was in accordance with what Luther was wanting friendship to be like. Friends seek to sharpen each other, yet at the same time taking off each other's moral imperfections. Pascal and Luther write about different developments that friendship had through the life of a friendship. Pascal said the reason why people were friends was because of the mental and physical possessions that they had, and if the opposite friend was willing to receive what the other friend has to offer. Luther said people should be friends because it is beneficial from a moral standpoint. Pascal's friendship was when the friendship is beginning, and Luther discussed the friendship at a maturity. Friends begin with being attracted to each other's ego, because that was what they are able to see and think of their other friend. It is possible for friends to stay in this state of simple admiration for the other, its capabilities and materials. A more significant friendship can occur between friends that are contributing to strive to have a better friendship. These friends will, as Martin Luther said, strive to cause the other to be better mentally and morally. These two authors are not displaying different feelings or even different friendships. They are writing about friendships at different maturities. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a French philosopher who wrote on what he thought was the ideal man. Rousseau believed the ideal man was one who had no cares and simply desired the next meal. He believed the reason why man was unhappy was because he had simply too many choices to make. In his discourse on Origin of Inequality, he talks about the kindness, which was a start to friendship. Rousseau believed that man had an increased chance of survival if he had a friendship. Rousseau explained why he thought friendship was a feeling of sacrifice between two friends who were willing to sacrifice for the other. It is then certain that compassion is a natural feeling, which by moderation, the activity of love of self in each individual, contributes to the preservation of the whole species. Rousseau believed that man possessed an innate sense of preservation to himself, which spreads to the entire race. He believed that influenced man to do things that he would otherwise not do. And it is this compassion that hurries us without reflection to the relief of those who are in distress. It is this which in state of nature supplies the place of laws, morals, and virtues, with the advantage that none are tempted to disobey its gentle voice. Rousseau reflected that people naturally protect themselves. There was a feeling in every person which Rousseau calls compassion that caused man to do things that, other than for this feeling, were not logical. This feeling was so strong that it could cause a man to perform actions that would place himself in danger. This feeling, which he calls compassion, caused man to put himself in danger to help other people. The connection between compassion and friendship was Rousseau's perspective, was compassion caused people to have a feeling that united them, bringing them together, causing them to be kind to each other. Rousseau explained friendship is as an anti-preservation act, which when one's friend is in danger, the other will put himself in any position, even if the position is more dangerous, to try and save his friend. Rousseau believed that the reason that people do this is not to enjoy the other people, but to try to preserve the human race. He thinks that the feeling that a friend would have is not one to help his friend, but because he wants to save his fellow human. This reason for friendship was not a good reason to have friendship. As Martin Luther said, friendship should be both friends trying to help the other friend to be better. Friendship is not to gain material for oneself, but is to improve the other person. Rousseau was in some way right, because friendship was created to sustain the human race. It was not just made to sustain a single person or what he desired for the human race. The way that friendship should work is each friend should try to sustain the person and try to improve the person morally and mentally. Kant, the philosopher, believed that man had an obligation to perform moral action. Kant called this a categorical imperative. He set guidelines on which actions were a categorical imperative. The first rule was that the action needed to be good in itself. Second, it needed to be able to be followed by everyone because it was universally accepted as good. Third, categorical imperatives could not come from any reason except the fact that it was good in itself. Kant believed that man should not have an ulterior motive to doing moral action. If man was influenced while doing categorical imperatives, his action would no longer be good, but have a selfishness that tainted their goodness. His idea of a categorical imperative transferred into his idea of friendship. In his perception of friendship, he believed kindness was not only a good action but an obligation that people must perform toward other people. Kant says, to be kind where one can is a duty, and there are, moreover, many persons so sympathetically constituted that with any motive of vanity of selfishness, they find an inner satisfaction in spreading joy and rejoice in the contentment of others which they have made possible. Kant says that being kind to other people was a categorical imperative. He thought there were some people that gained joy from being kind to other people. He believed this would be an exterior motivation. Kant believed a person that enjoys helping other people simply because it gave them a good feeling was not truly displaying friendship. He would put this friendship in the same class of friendship that Don Quixote and Sancho had at the beginning of their friendship. He was of the same opinion that people that had this friendship were no longer doing it simply to help other people, but to gain, as he thinks, a feeling of joy that would no longer be friendship but selfishness. The people that had this type of friendship were those who were considered the most friendly kind of person because they enjoy being kind to other people. Kant proposed that these people were not friends but selfish because they were not being kind to other people but because they feel good about themselves. Kant's idea of friendship personified would be a person who disliked other people but would do friendly things toward them because it was the right thing to do. This trait of friendship would be difficult to have between friends. The joy that occurs while serving a friend not only was a reason people have friendship, it would be impossible for people to have this feeling taken away from a friendship. If a person were not to enjoy the feeling of being kind to other people, it seems as though a friendship could not form. As Pascal said, a person was enjoyed for what they do because they made them who they were. If a person had a moral obligation to have friendship, then it would be forced and would no longer seem like a friendship. The distinction between Kant and Rousseau's ideas of whether or not to do good to other people were two separate reasons to have friendship. Rousseau thinks that the love of self that spreads to the rest of the human race would be the driving emotion behind why people do kind actions toward one another. Kant, in contrast, believed that it was man's moral obligation to be kind towards other people. Kant believed that the purest form of being kind cannot come from a joy of helping other people. Kant would seem to be forming a type of friendship that people were not kind toward each other, but doing pleasant things towards one another because it was simply the right thing to do. Rousseau believed that man was selfish. Out of selfishness, man was kind to gain friends, which gave him an enhanced chance of survival and a chance for his species to persist. Rousseau and Kant both believed that man did acts of kindness. However, Rousseau believed that man did it out of selfishness, while Kant thinks that one should be kind towards other people because it is the right thing to do. Rousseau and Kant's friendship were similar to the types of friendship written of by Luther and Pascal. Rousseau's friendship was similar to the friendship discussed of by Pascal. Rousseau believed the reasons why people were friends were because the mutual chance of survival that friends have, which would be considered part of ego that Pascal talks about. Kant's friendship was more similar to the Luther because they both believed that moral goodness is the root of friendship. These friendships seem as if they split into two types of friendship. The first would be a singular friend trying to gain materials or feelings from the friendship. The second, the two friends want to help each other become better morally. Friendship is in any form would be a good thing because it had traits of what God created it to be. Pascal's friendship would be admirable because the friendships was held in high esteem. The disadvantage of this friendship was that once the friends were no longer willing to sacrifice their materials for the other friend, the friendship would end abruptly. Martin Luther's friendship was commendable because the friends have a devotion towards each other that they desired to impel their friends to become better people. Potential downside to this bond was that the friends must love each other enough to understand the other friend wish the best for them, or the friendship will crack under the pressure of criticism and harsh words. A benefit of Rousseau's friendship was people displayed compassion because they were trying to save the human race. The limitation to this urge was that Rousseau believed that people were kind toward other people out of the want of self-preservation, which if a person were given the chance between saving himself or his single friend, he would choose to save himself. Kant believed that people were kind because it was the right thing to do. The negative side of Kant's friendship was it would seem wrong to have the joy a friend has when he did something kind to his friend. These authors present various purposes of friendship. All of them seem as though they were exhibited admirable traits, yet they seem as though they were flawed as well. Jesus, when he came to the human race, displayed all the positive aspects and friendships, sacrifices of these friendships. As Pascal came to save people from their sin, he displayed features of the friendship written of by Pascal. Jesus came because he loved his people because of the traits they had. They were his creation, shaped in his image. He presented qualities of Martin Luther's friendship. Jesus was not pleased with how his people were sinning, and he gave a solution. He gave his life so that man would be able to be friends with him in heaven. Jesus' choices were to the guidelines that Martin Luther had set. When Jesus came to earth, he did not have malice towards people, and was not selfish of their materials, but came with a fatherly affection and Christian zeal to rebuke people on earth and to offer them the solution in his life. Jesus sacrificed, as Rousseau said, one should toward other people. Jesus wanted to preserve not himself, but the entire human race. When Jesus came to earth, the action of him coming also fit into Kant's idea of a categorical imperative. Jesus came to earth with no outside influences, but to save the human race because it was the right thing to do. Jesus displayed the perfect friendship when he came to earth. All the writers had a type of sacrifice that they thought was the ideal sacrifice that they would personify friendship. All their ideas of friendship were indeed a type of friendship in which sacrifice was the intention that was common between them. The intention between friendship was that both friends are willing to place the other's well-being before their own. When author writes of his friendship, they believe that their variation is the ideal one. The different purposes of friendship which authors have written about. Blaise Pascal portrays a friendship that people enjoy each other because of how they act and what they can gain. He says this is what makes up a person. This would be similar to the friendship that was seen between Don Quixote and Sancho, because the friendship was built on what the other person has and can give. Martin Luther did not think that a person should be satisfied with their friends not being a good person, but should attempt to help the other person in becoming a better person morally by using harsh words and criticism. Rousseau believed that preservation of self was the cause that people displayed compassion toward each other. He thinks that because people were trying to survive, they enhanced the other's chance of survival if they are kind towards other people in order to gain friendship. Kant thinks that humans have a duty to do an action that would be morally right, which he calls a categorical imperative. Being kind was a categorical imperative which should be done toward other people because it was the right thing to do. Kant believed that a person should not be kind because he gets a joy from being kind, but because they know being kind is the right thing to do. Though there are different purposes for having friendship, sacrifice was common through all of them, all friendships, which made it a defining attribute which defined friendship. Jesus was the perfect example of friendship as he displayed traits and sacrifices from each of these friendships. Jesus came to earth because he loved his creation, the human race. He wanted to save his creation from their mistakes. He came because he wanted to save the human race and because it was the right action to take.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hendrix. I would like to begin by having you clarify a couple points that you made. In your third paragraph, you make the statement, the friendship between the two friends seems as if it began with ego, but continued into a deeper friendship between the two friends as they were willing to sacrifice belongings and ideas with each other. I'd like you to clarify what you meant by friendships that begin with ego.
Okay, so ego is what you see in a person. So, like, I was looking at your ego, it would be like school teacher, 6'1", black hair, can fly airplanes. And so, like, if I saw that, say I liked mechanical airplanes, I would see that part of your ego, and it would be like, I really like that. So that would be the beginning of the friendship, because we both I would admire flying airplanes. And so that begin, and then the friendship would progress as, say you gave me an airplane, and then I helped fix you with an airplane. And so that's kind of how it continued. It starts with ego, the admiration of ego, and then it continued through sacrifice.
Okay. Maybe another word for ego might be the sum total of the visible personal characteristics, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just the characteristics. And it seemed like you were relating that back to Pascal's theory on the basis of friendship. Can you explain how that concept relates to what Pascal said about the basis of friendship?
Yeah, Pascal said that friendship, so he's saying that a person's love for their personal attributes, which is their ego. And so he's saying that friendship is based on the admiration of each other's ego.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I think Pascal said that in opposition to just kind of trying to love their bare soul.
Yeah.
Can you love the soul of a person? He says no. All that we can love is characteristics, because we can't see the soul.
Yeah.
And so we have to love characteristics. Now, we do say that Pascal's position on friendship there is a sort of begrudging, a position that should be kind of a begrudging position to the fact that this is just the way that we as human beings have to love, or are you saying that that characteristic is something that we should work against, or is a sort of deficient form of friendship?
I think it's a perfectly fine form of friendship. I just don't think it. So I would say a friendship begins, like Pascal said, with ego, but I think that it continues into almost like a love of each other once you start sacrificing for one another.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay, could you say in more detail then how a friendship might develop beyond that initial stage of admiration for ego, admiration for the sum total of the personal characteristics? What does it progress on to if that's just the beginning?
I would say it progresses on to more of a friendship that Martin Luther talks about, where both friends are trying to improve each other, like morally, or where once they get to the point that they can both try to extend the other person's benefit, the good things they can do, then it starts to become a deeper friendship.
Okay, so friendship should begin in admiration for the characteristics and then move towards an active desire for the improvement of the other person.
Yeah, but I do think that if it stays with the type of friendship that, just admiration of each other, it's not a bad thing, it's just not as good as the next step.
Yeah. Also, other question, the obvious absence here on the theory of friendship is that of Aristotle. And is there any particular reason why you left Aristotle out of your examination of the characteristics of friendship?
I I couldn't find the book.
I appreciate your honesty. Now, Aristotle, in his estimation of friendship, he says that the basis of friendship is the mutual admiration of character. And he breaks down the three types of friendship. As there's perfect friendship, which is based on the mutual admiration of character. Utilitarian friendship, which is friendship for what you get for the person, and friendship for pleasure is just kind of the pleasure they bring to you. In his description of true friendship, it says it has to be based on mutual admiration of character. So that, two people know each other, they find each other's character admirable, and because of that, they want to be friends with one another. That seems to be his notion of ideal friendship. As you develop Luther's theory, you seem to say in Luther's theory there might be friendship in which there's a real points at which the friends don't find each other's character correct, and so that there's the presence of rebuke. And I'll have to say I kind of wonder if Aristotle or Luther is more realistic. It seems that when people in friendship, when one friend looks at another and says, what you're doing is really wrong, that's not good. And quite oftentimes people say, well, if that's what you think of me, we're not friends anymore. That there seems to almost be a sort of, in friendship, the mutual admiration of one another seems to be a fairly necessary characteristic.
Yeah.
Is it really possible in the context of friendship to have rebuke, or is that perhaps another type of relationship? Maybe, teacher to student, parent to child. Those relationships you'll have rebuke. To have rebuke between friends, not really going to work.
The way I see it is Martin Luther's is a deeper type of friendship where the two friends are willing to put up with each other's, they're willing to accept criticism. So once they mutually try to improve each other, it's almost like a bike wheel kind of, where if they all support each other equally, where they both they do admire each other, but they do see things that could be improved, and once they can get to they accept improvement, then I think it's a deeper type of friendship than what Aristotle talks about.
Mm. Do you think there could be a sort of friendship that is entirely absent of what Aristotle speaks of, this sort of admiration? A friendship that might be perhaps just based on common association. Somebody that you work with, that you're with them 8 hours every day, and you just have a commonality. But quite honestly, if you look at this person, you know them, and you're really not impressed with their character. But you guys spend a lot of time together, and there is just a sort of a type of friendship there. It's not admiration, but something more like common association. Is that also friendship, or does there really need to be a sort of mutual admiration of the character there?
Yeah, it seems more like an acquaintance to me. If the two friends they like hanging out with each other, and it might even be partially what Pascal talks about, where they like each other's ego a little bit, where they both like movies or something. I don't know. It's not character or something. They just both like how the other thinks or what they're good at, and so it's not really admiration. It's just they kind of like what the other person likes. So it's more like Pascal's friendship is more like an acquaintance friendship. It seems like to me.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, questions from others for Mr. Hendrix.
Ben?
Alright, so what do you think the highest form of, or the highest motivation for friendship would be? Because I can see that there would be some motivation for friendship, where the two each other, but if we're going for being, where you don't want something back, it would almost seem like there would be a higher form of friendship when one person wants to improve the other person and the other person doesn't, because there's more on one side and less on the other. But it just makes more sense. But what do you think would be the highest form of friendship?
Yeah, I could see. That's what Jesus did when he came to save us, which we had nothing to really give. But then Jesus came. Yeah, I agree with you. It's if one person can't really improve the other person, but the other can. It's a much different type of friendship.
Yeah, so
That's-
the highest form of friendship is the one where there's the most self-sacrifice involved on one side and the littlest on the other.
I wouldn't say necessarily the littlest, because I feel like, what do you mean by littlest? Because,
Well,
I mean,
Like,
people do have to when they become Christians, they do sacrifice like their citizenship to the world pretty much.
yeah, but why we do that is because there's no way we could ever repay what Jesus did. But what I meant by the littlest was just that there's no chance of them ever repaying what the other one is giving to them.
Yeah, I agree. That's the deepest type of friendship.
Oh yeah, and at the end of the paper you had Jesus as your final form of friendship, so we actually had the highest form of friendship of all of them. So
Yeah.
thank you.
But it's kind of mixed in with all of them. Like, all of these people have some trait of friendship.
They're all sort of different levels of the same friendship.
Yeah. Rachel.
Hi Jonathan, great paper, I enjoyed it. So I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
The first one is, I thought it was interesting you brought up Don Quixote and Sancho as sort of the main friendship that you talked about. Because I remember in the very beginning of the book, when Sancho first leaves, he's talking to his wife, and she's like, why on earth are you gallivanting around with this crazy guy? And he's like, well, he promised me all this stuff. I don't really like him, but he said I could get all this out of it. So then he goes off with Don Quixote. So it doesn't necessarily seem to me personally, at least, I was wondering if you could elaborate on this, that friendship was out of ego, like a mutual, like attractiveness for each other. It seems more that Sancho thought he could get something out of it.
Yeah, which is, I think that's part of ego, because that's like kind of what, in Sancho's mind, that's what defined Don Quixote, was giver of violence. And so he liked that a lot. And so, and also Don Quixote really liked that Sancho was loyal to him. And so he kept staying with him, well, except for the parts that he ran away. But besides that, he pretty much, and then, of course, farther on in the story, they create a friendship because they both go through so much together. But that's what I think, yeah.
So you wouldn't say it was so much motivated out of personal gain, it was just he classified Don Quixote in a good sense in his mind because he associated good things with him?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. And then my second question, I was actually wondering why you didn't bring up Plato's Phaedrus and the whole friendship discussion, but I thought it would really relate to your paper in an interesting way. And I was thinking maybe you could elaborate on that as well, the whole idea of, he says that when you engage in true friendship, it all relates back to the forms. And there's this one phrase I like that Socrates says, it's be slow to fall into friendship, but when you do continue on, steady and constant, something like that. And then he also says, the true friendship, they come to a point where finally they see each other as just so attracted, they can sort of glimpse their heavenly beauty type thing, which seems sort of the opposite process of first they're attracted and then they start developing more of a deep connection. So what are your thoughts on that?
Wait, so what exactly, like, why I didn't put it in the paper, or what?
Oh, no, just the whole idea in general.
Of becoming to see the heavenly forms of the
Yeah,
person?
so
Okay.
like the Plato idea versus your paper's idea.
Yeah, I think that's very, from a human perspective, that's very normal. But I feel like that's almost staying at Pascal's level, like the ego, where they just they start admiring each other more and more. Ego until it becomes like until it becomes so great that they just think that each other's so great that they think they're heavenly. So I think it's just a bigger version of ego, pretty much.
Interesting. And then another question, it seemed as you were talking with Mr. H, you were saying about how, when you form a deeper bond, it's when you can kind of you can accept criticism from them, and you both try to help each other improve. However, oftentimes your friends are very well intentioned, but they give you advice that wouldn't help you. Or maybe very detrimental life decisions are made because your friends told you to do it. So what do you think about that case? Is there exceptions to the general rule?
So people have like harder or like bad decisions.
Well, when your friends give you harmful criticism, they mean it to be good advice because they think themselves it's good advice, but it's really harmful advice. There are a lot of examples where, hey, just take this pill, it'll make you feel better, you can study, and you won't get behind in your classes, but that may have a lot of bad effects later on.
I don't quite get how that's criticism. Like, I still think it's like more of, like Pascal said, they just like what each other can give each other and materials. So
I guess I'm just saying, is it is advice from friend to friend always a good thing? Because it seems like you were saying, the deeper the connection gets, the more they can accept advice from the other person.
Yeah, I think that as long as the person's improving morally, I think the main part for improvement should be morally, like Luther said, fatherly affection, which I think shouldn't be like things like that, but should be like you shouldn't be cheating on tests or something, which I think is a bigger, like morally wrong or something.
Okay, so the advice helps as long as it's like morally correct.
Yeah, and more importantly, as long as it's not morally incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wait, one more question.
Okay.
I thought this was really interesting, the whole idea of trying to develop your friendship as you continue to get attracted to each other and you're trying to help each other improve. And it reminded me sort of the goal of marriage in a sense, to get closer together and try to help each other and sort of sacrificing your own needs for theirs and things like that. So how closely related is it to marriage? And if you continued on in perfect friendship, would it eventually lead to marriage?
Probably, as long as everything's set up right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, fine.
So on the critique of friendship, hypothetically say that you were a kid who played baseball since you were like 4 years old, and I was your friend, and I saw that you were slacking off your studies and stuff just to go play baseball, and I come up to you and I say, I'm saying this as a friend, but you should focus on other things instead of just focusing on baseball, because the percentages of you playing baseball as a profession when you get older is less than 1%. Would that be me being a good friend, or am I being detrimental to you because I have told you something that probably would hurt a lot?
I think it is that'd be as long as you do it like with what Martin Luther said, with like if you're not selfish of how good the other person is because they're so good at baseball, or like because you're angry at them because they beat you pitching or something. I don't know. As long as you're pretty much going with what Martin Luther set for guidelines, I think it would be a good thing to do. Yeah. Josh.
I really enjoyed your paper, thank you. You said at the end of your paper, I'll paraphrase a little bit, that even though there are different purposes for having friendship, commonly it seems that sacrifice is a necessary action which defines friendship.
Yeah.
Now, could you real quick maybe give examples or just explain sacrifice through these different types of friendship?
Okay, yeah. So Pascal, the first friendship would be like sacrificing like materials, so like giving people stuff and not really expecting things back, and then time, if you're like mentally smart, like helping people with tests. Martin Luther would be willing to sacrifice the friendship because you're wanting the best morally for the other person and not just the friendship. So I think next, I think that, like, that's kind of what he's saying is friendship's defined by sacrifice. That's what he is saying. And then Kant, I think I had something, but I don't remember. Kant said, I think he's just saying that as whatever's like a categorical imperative, which I think would include sacrifice inside of the friendship, is what, like, it's a good thing to do. And so I think that's what this includes, sacrificing.
Okay, awesome. And so you're relating Jesus' sacrifice, or his friendship to humanity, and his sacrifice being his death for us.
Yeah.
Right? Would you say, since he's the perfect example of friendship, do you think we should all strive to get to that point of being able to say, my life is less important and I'm going to sacrifice for this friendship, even my life? Or do you think that's not always a necessary, I guess, thing to strive for?
I do think that's probably the ideal. Like, some of the Bible says, like, there's no such thing as, or there's no greater friendship than one man laying his life down for another. Paraphrasing, of course. But yeah, that's what it is, yeah.
Awesome. And I guess just one last thing. How would you differentiate, like, friendship and love? There's a lot of, like, feeling, emotion type terms thrown around, just in general, and sometimes it gets a little muddled. So real quick, could you, like, give a definition of friendship and then love?
So yeah, I think friendship includes love and vice versa. But I think a friendship can also not include love as much. Like, for instance, if it's Pascal, like, there's not really love between them because they're not really, like, they're willing to sacrifice their things, but not really, like, anything important. And then I think love is just, like, being willing to sacrifice your life for other people. Yeah.
Thank you.
Or Weston?
Two questions. First one may or may not be applicable. I'm wondering, has your class yet read Freud yet?
No.
No? Okay, because I was interested about your use of the term ego. And the way that Freud breaks ego down is into kind of three different camps. You've got the id, which is kind of predatory nature, kind of what St. Paul was saying in Romans about giving into carnality or sins of the flesh. And then you've got ego, which is kind of like the middleman. You've got the superego, which is kind of like conscience, the voice of God-ish whispering in our minds. And I guess, even though you haven't read him quite yet, I was wondering, with that sort of that sort of a picture of ego, would your idea of friendship still work? Like, could you make friends based on the id, based on the ego, based on superego, or is it just ego?
I haven't really read them, so I don't know too much about them, but
That's it.
or if they're even, like, the egos are similar, but probably, I mean, you can probably act with each of your id, ego, and superego around different people, and so then you can also be attracted to the three different types of ego from a person. Like, if, I don't know, some person acts super base around one group of people and he's friends with them, and then he acts like, I don't know, he goes to school and he acts with his ego, and then he goes to church and he has a super ego. He can have friends in each of those groups, and he might be able to have friends from, I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds like it works out for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. A second, so a couple times in your paper you quote from Martin Luther. Love that guy. However, it also comes to my mind that he, at least culturally speaking, was one of those German pub-loving, sometimes really strong words kind of people. And I was wondering, like, not just strong words in terms of saying a very moving points that might, kind of come across as offensive, but also using words that are very provocative. I was wondering your thoughts on using, those provocative words that aren't neat and clean and, are normally said we should use. Am I making sense right now?
Could you connect it to friendship?
Yeah, I'm wondering, is it ever acceptable to use, like, say, the F word if you're trying to make a point to a friend about how to, if you can improve their life, basically?
I think people will usually cuss because they can't describe what they're trying to say with other words. And
Okay.
so I think if you can use different words, it's probably much better. I don't think it's really, I don't know, but words are pretty complicated.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I don't know how it exactly works with friendship, but yeah.
All right, yeah, thank you.
I have a question now from Ms. Nye Stevenson.
Mine's just more of a clarifying question. You use the phrase "the right thing to do" a lot in your paper, and I was just wondering if you could be a little bit more specific with that.
Yeah, so I'm pretty much talking from like a biblical point of view. So if a person were to, steal, from the Luther point of view, you should try to, the friend would tell them not to do it. So from a biblical point of view, the right thing to do. Is that,
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to kind of get back to the question I think Josh was asking earlier about the distinction between friendship and love, and particularly romantic love. And I was wondering, I just kind of asked the question in an interesting way, is marriage and friendship the same thing? And is it possible to have a marriage that's a very good marriage, but not a friendship? Or, you can have a friendship that's not a marriage. Obviously, that seems to be often the case. I think it's interesting how rarely you find, you have lots of single-sex friendships that are not marriages, of course, but you very rarely find opposite-sex friendships that are not a marriage. And I don't know a married man that has a very good friendship with another woman besides his wife. And so, is friendship and marriage, well, how do I ask more clearly? Is friendship, is marriage necessarily a type of friendship?
I would say it depends on how you define marriage to start with. If
That's what I wanted you to do.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
asking you to define it.
If you're talking about a state marriage, I'm pretty sure you could have a pretty not, they just never see each other. They just maybe once or twice a year, or I don't know.
That doesn't seem like a marriage.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a marriage at all. And so I think a marriage, pretty much does have to have a friendship where both people are trying to improve the other person, and I think they have to enjoy each other as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and one more clearing up thing. I believe Pascal and Martin Luther are the same type of friendship, but just different maturities, like I said. So a marriage could start with just admiring each other, but the admiration would never stop through the whole marriage. It would just mature into being able to use criticism and harsh words towards each other.
Well, I was trying to think too. You have situations where, two guys are very good friends with one another, and yet they're not lovers. Now, could a man and a woman be very good lovers, but not really friends?
I probably, because I think you can have just two people who get married to each other and probably never see each other at all until each night or something. And so they never see each other at all. And then
Well, I was thinking about the example, I remember hearing about an ancient Sparta. The Spartan men spent so much time in battle that it basically, the Spartan man would come home for one day a year, and he would see his wife. And imagine under those circumstances, it would be hard. Imagine he had lots of passion for her, but it's hard to imagine how they developed much of a friendship.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think one reason why guys have more like super in-depth friendships with each other is because they like do sports with each other, and I'm sure it's the same with girls. I don't know exactly, but we do things with each other a lot more. So like if you're in the army, it's kind of the same way where everybody wants everybody to be the best because everybody's counting on it. And so if you're in the army, you kind of need everybody to be the best possible, and you're going to criticize everybody trying to make them the best. And I think that's one reason why you have more people that are the same gender that have deeper relationships, because they just do more things with each other.
Yeah, Aristotle makes an interesting comment about friendship. He says, friendship at a distance is potential friendship, but it ceases in its activity. And his assumption is that for friendship, you have to be face to face. You have to be spending time with one another, basically living together, and having very common life. That's Aristotle's vision of friendship, but it's a very sort of, lots of slumber party sort of friendship. And so for Aristotle, when you're separated from your friend, the activity of the friendship stops. Now you still, the friendship is still there potentially. When you return, it will continue on. But when you're separated, the friendship is not really doing friendship. Now, with marriage, you can be married to someone and be a sailor and be gone for 2 years. You're on Magellan's voyage, and you're still married. Would you say also in that, that would seem to be an instance where marriage is not the same thing as friendship. Marriage does not cease its activity. Or would you say the same thing of marriage, that when you are apart, the activity of marriage ceases, like friendship does?
I think it can. I think it can stop. I think if somebody's gone for a long time and they just leave, like say they're on the 2-year voyage and they stay on the other side of the ocean, and they get married to somebody else, I think the action of marriage can stop. Can be on hold, but we're not even on hold. It can completely end. But I do believe that friendship, marriage, that's where it's similar, because a person can sacrifice not giving into pleasures or anything for the 2 years, and sacrificing that for their spouse. And so that's one reason why the friendship and marriage can be similar. Is because they're willing to sacrifice so much for each other for 2 years. Being able to stay married for 2 years and not seeing each other at all would be pretty amazing. Or like Penelope and Odysseus, of course.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Ben.
Okay, so what you were saying about the military and sports is that it sort of skips the first level of friendship and goes directly to Luther's level because it's sort of necessity, so you don't have time for niceties, and then after that, the rest of the friendship sort of fills in.
Well, kind of. So I think it's more like an instructor relationship. If you're just if you're just criticizing, I think it's more like a teacher-instructor type of person.
Yeah.
But I do think, if you're going to sports, then you'll kind of be like, oh, he can catch the ball really well, or he can save goals really well. And you're like, well, that's really cool. And so you kind of admire his ego, and then you're like, hey, do you want to do this? And then you start, working out with each other, and sacrificing time with each other, and then it becomes a deeper friendship.
Yeah, so in those things, the shared necessity of being, especially in the military, of being the best, and in sports, of just wanting to improve yourself and the other person, because you have a vested interest in that, helps with because you admire their ego, so that just helps build a friendship.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, Grandpa.
Jonathan, I have not read Rousseau, and I was curious if you could tell me why the man believed that friendship was necessary for the preservation of the human race?
So he's more. Rousseau seems like a pretty staunch, like, evolutionist type of guy to me, and so reading him, he kind of wanted the best, or no. So from an evolutionary standpoint, there's no reason for friendship, really. But what he says is that the more people that survive, like that support each other, makes the. It's like it's a gene thing that helps the human race survive. Yeah. Josh.
Oh, I just want to say, you're talking about like long distance marriage, relationships, all that sort of thing. So, real quick, I was wondering, how important is the physical presence of somebody? And I'm not talking about long distance relationship as in where you just don't talk to them for months at a time or years. I'm talking about even if you're in contact with that person, how important is the physical presence of that person to the forming of a truly great friendship?
So it's much more difficult, which is one reason why it can be so much greater or so much worse. Because if you're willing to sacrifice not being able to physically be with the person and yet still have the friendship, it could be much better. But being able to keep it for, if you're only, I don't know, FaceTiming, it's much harder to sacrifice through there than if, I don't know, like if you're on a team and you like sacrifice making a goal so the other person can, type of thing. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Hendrix. Well, and my thanks to all of you, and particularly for those of you who I've seen at so many of these lectures. Really beautiful to be able to spend the time looking at all these ideas together, and also just very significant time for me and seeing your guys' work and your labors. Have to admit, if this was a swim team and all of you were, dropping in the water, drowning all the time, I'd be fairly despairing as your swim coach that, this is an activity that's not functioning to serve its purpose. And with GBT, to be able to see you guys really embracing the activity of understanding and reading works and engaging ideas and profound and substantive fashion is very beautiful and very fulfilling to me, and kind of realizing I've got a bit of a rut in my life, and if I failed at this, it's a little disconcerting. And so, but GBT seems alive and well, and that's because of your guys' efforts. So thank you very much. It's been a great time. You are more than welcome to hang around and socialize.
And you can join us for dinner at our house if you'd like to.
Free dinner with the Hendrixes.
Feel free to stay, please.
Okay.
Did you want to ask a question?
But you know what? You got the address?
Yeah, no.